What is up, everybody? Welcome back to MLB Swing for the Fences here on Wednesday, July 9th. 11-game baseball slate to talk about and here to break it down, as usual, on Wednesdays. The great Statsational Stats. How you doing on this Wednesday afternoon?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Just catching up, coming in from the hot and humid weather as we're going to be having here in Florida all summer.
Yes, you're used to it. But some places around the country they're getting used to it, I guess, because, we do have heat, humidity, some good hitting weather, some really good home run parks tonight. Should be hopefully a higher scoring slate than we had on the early slate. Some pretty boring baseball games there so far. And, I think kind of a tougher slate for pitching, at least for me, from what I'm looking at. I don't see a ton that I'm very excited to play. So try to get to the bottom of all that, of course, talking all 11 games. We'll do the pitching and stacks at the end, maybe a dong draft if we got time. And, try to get to the winner's circle. But with 11 games to talk about stats, let's get right into it. We do start out in Baltimore. Potential weather issues here. Kind of like you see, a lot of the East Coast this time of year seems to have potential for pop-up storms. Generally, they get most of these games in, but, we saw the Blue Jays-White Sox game. No, it's not on the East Coast, but sometimes they hover over the stadium and, you lose the last 3 innings. That was frustrating for me last night. I had a good one that needed one more Toronto rush there. Didn't happen. But on to today, we'll have to watch the weather in Camden Yards. David Peterson going for the Mets here, throwing from the left side. He's had a pretty strong season for them. He's been a little shakier of late. This does look like a good strikeout matchup for him, though, against this Orioles squad. So Peterson at 9K, kind of an uncomfortable price point for me, but on this slate, I think he's at least in consideration. And then the Orioles would go with Tomoyuki Sugano. Doesn't miss a lot of bats, has had 5 pretty bad starts in a row, and now gets this Mets team that we know has a ton of power, wind blowing out in Baltimore. And assuming this game does end up playing and looks safe enough to play bats, I think the Mets got to be on the short list for upside stacks. They are expensive, but could certainly prove worth it. Stats, what do you see here, Mets and Orioles?
Yeah, no doubt. As far as the stacks go, I think the Mets are going to be one of the better stacks here of the entire slate. But like you said, we're going to have to keep track of that weather. It looks a little iffy as of right now. It's kind of looking at it while you were talking there. So we'll see after 6. We'll get a better, hopefully a little bit clearer picture. But if they play this one, I agree with the Mets stacks. I think it's going to be one of the premier stacks here for the night. Should be good if they play it. The weather should be good as far as batters are concerned. Ball will travel. Like all the big names here, Alonso, Lindor, Nemo, Soto, and Beatty is in there, 3,300. A little bit of a savings. You can also play Winker here at 2,500 to save you. But I love 5-man stacks with the Mets. I think high probabilities for home runs here. You got Mauricio and McNeil. All those guys are all at reasonable prices. So I think there's a lot of ways you can go with the Mets lineup and get yourself a pretty good 5-man stack that you can put with one of these secondary stacks. So you'll be able to fit the Mets in with most other teams. As far as the pitching, Peterson, I've got ranked as my 4th best pitcher here on the slate. Like I said, we've got upside here with, decent strikeout matchup. He does have a little bit of control issues. He's one of the we got a few pitchers here on this slate kind of in that range. Not the worst of control, but does have a tendency. We're looking at close to 0.4 walks per inning for Peterson here tonight. As far as Sugano, I've just got no interest. I mean, you look at the betting markets on Sugano, we've got 3.5 Ks for him, and that's actually juiced to the under. So no interest. 5.5 Ks for Peterson with that juice to the over, and 17.5 on his outs prop. So I do like Peterson tonight. Assuming that they get this one in, I think he's going to be one of my higher options. So it's going to be difficult. People won't play him, obviously, because of weather and there'll be some concern that they're going to get the full 9 in, and that they don't necessarily have a delay within this game to cost Peterson some innings. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But let's assume that this game goes clean. I'm going to probably be over the market on Peterson than what we're seeing on Saber right now.
Yeah, I do think. I mean, just looking at the radar, it looks pretty rough. There's a lot of rain coming toward Baltimore.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine in the next 2 hours that it clears up enough to feel safe with a pitcher in this game. But yeah, you never know. This time of year, I do think it's more likely that we'll be able to take a reasonable risk on the Mets stack, right, with the upside they bring to the table. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Peterson, again, maybe it clears up and there's a window. And if that's the case, we do get Peterson with probably some pretty low ownership. People aren't going to want to play this game, I don't think, even if it looks okay. Just a lot of people on an 11-game slate, they see weather issues and they just kind of move on to the next one. I'm not even saying that's a terrible strategy, but once in a while you can find a game that actually does seem safe and people don't want to play. Maybe this could turn out to be that, and if so, I think Peterson does make some sense. A big strikeout potential for him against this, in particular, this Orioles lineup. So yeah, we're on the same page there. All Mets for us in the Mets and Orioles game. Obviously, all of that weather permitting. Brings us to Yankee Stadium for the Mariners and the Yankees. Same weather that's going to kind of go through Baltimore. It looks like most of it will probably eventually reach New York too. So I think some risk here with the Yankees, maybe more than I thought when I looked at it this morning. But we'll talk about all these games at least as if they're going to play for now. Logan Evans will go for Seattle. Hasn't been terrible for them so far, but one thing with him, he hasn't really missed any bats, even pitching in the best strikeout park in baseball in Seattle. Now you put him in Yankee Stadium against this powerful Yankees team who finally DFA'd DJ LeMahieu, so we don't have to worry about his zero in the lineup anymore. But yeah, powerful team. Looks like really good hitting weather if they're able to play. And yeah, Evans. Anytime you get these pitchers that allow power and can't strike anybody out, you put them against this Yankees team. You've got one of the highest, highest potential stacks of any of them. So definitely in on the Yankees, particularly the first 5. I think looks pretty strong for the Yankees against Logan Evans, and then the Yankees will go with rookie Cam Schlittler. Bit of an unfortunate name for him, but Schlittler. He actually looks pretty decent in his minor league numbers, a really high strikeout rate. He's pitched 23 innings at AAA. He started in AA, but his last 23 have come in AAA. 35% strikeout rate for him in those innings. Obviously, it doesn't always translate to the big league level, but I think at least interesting on this slate at 7K against a high strikeout Mariners team. Yes, they do have powerful bats in the lineup, and I do think Schlittler, has plenty of risk of getting given up home runs or whatever, but I think there could be strikeouts for him here. I'm not sure what his strikeout prop was, but he seems like a pitcher who could go 90-plus pitches potentially. The stuff looks pretty good to me, and the results have mostly been there for him in AAA. So I think he's at least worth discussing. Stats, where'd you end up here? Seattle and the Yankees.
Yeah, let's look at Schlittler's props. I mean, 4.5 Ks, which is not terrible for 7K, but they're looking at 14.5 outs. It is juiced to the over, so they're just not expecting him to go deep in the game. Also, a guy a little, he will walk batters as well. So if he is on any sort of pitch count, we're really not expecting him too deep. So I think we are capped at maybe what his ceiling will be, where there is a lower ceiling, let's say, than perhaps the arm talent would dictate. So I'm going to be pretty low here, if not playing any Schlittler at all. And on the Evans side, I mean, 3.5 Ks is his prop, 15.5 outs, heavily juiced to the under. I have no interest in Evans. He's one of the worst options for me on the slate. Schlittler, I've got like as the 15 choice. So really not a ton of interest in either one of these pitchers. Now the Yankee bats, I think, are a given here. You've got Judge. Stanton's still reasonably priced. I know he hasn't been Stanton yet. We'll see if we could get that. Dominguez at 3,900. Those are a couple of the cheaper options here for the Yankees, but with Judge and Jazz and Bellinger, all those are going to be really highly rated. Now on the Seattle side, there's not many options here as far as real great leverage plays necessarily against the starting pitcher. But even if we get double digit, 10 to 15% here on Schlittler, I think Seattle does offer some little bit. They're one of the better options. There's not many great ones here today, but I think Seattle, a decent option if you're looking to get any leverage off a pitcher who's going to have any sort of ownership. So Raleigh with Polanco at 3,500, Canzoni at 3,700, Arozarena. All those guys I think are in play. So I think you can play 5-man stacks. Raleigh, Julio, all of these guys I like. You could play 5-man Seattle stacks. I think get a little bit of leverage. The Yankee stacks, though, I think are premier here. I think we're looking at Met and Yankee stacks right now as we've gone over the first two games. Is really solid stacks. But I think you could definitely play Seattle to get a little bit different in your lineups. I think they do play tonight.
Yeah, this could get pretty interesting if the first two games we've talked about here, Mets and Orioles and Yankees and Mariners, if the weather kind of keeps getting worse, you got to make those decisions. Could throw kind of all the ownership projections just kind of out the window at that point, and we'll see what people end up with. So we're gonna have to pay attention to that, of course. Our crew will be in the Discord making final calls on the weather, and it does look to me like it could be a situation where it kind of comes right down to it, up to lock, where you got to make the decision based on the weather at the current time and the forecast. So
the Yankees right now look okay. I think
they do
right
but
now.
It reminds me of that Red Sox slate. I don't know, like a week and a half ago, where
don't remind me of that. Yeah,
where the forecast looked okay, but if you looked at the radars, like seems like there's a lot of rain coming, and I kind of see this one similarly. So we'll see a couple hours before lock here, but I'll definitely be keeping a very close eye on the radar and the forecast for these two games, because I think they are two of the better games for offense. And Schlittler, I think I might throw him in there in one of my 5. I'm intrigued by what he might be able to bring to the table. And I know the outs prop is low. I kind of think that doesn't maybe encapsulate if things are going well. I do think he could go 5 or 6 innings, but obviously could be a quick hook if they're not. So I do get why that number would be set low, but I think he could go 6 innings if things are looking good for Schlittler, which I think they might. So a little bit of interest there, despite a dangerous spot to pitch for sure against this Seattle team in Yankee Stadium. Next one up, Rockies and Red Sox in Fenway. Red Sox have absolutely pounded this Rockies team, even more so than most teams do. We've seen both Dick Fitz and Brian Bayo just mow through this team, racking up strikeouts. It's no surprise. Most pitchers are able to do that against this Rockies team. Tonight it would be Lucas Giolito, who I've kind of got my question marks about him long-term, but I do think he is clearly the best pitcher of those three guys, Bayo, Fitz, and then Giolito. And I kind of think stats that he's going to get a ton of ownership tonight. I mean, he should. Everyone that played Bayo last night, you're going to be back on board. Why not? Why not throw the next guy out there against the Rockies? And everyone that didn't probably doesn't want to miss out again, right? So I think you're going to see a lot of people pile on the Giolito train, especially on a tough night for pitching, which I think we both kind of agree on. He should be, I think, the highest owned pitcher on the slate. I'm not super comfortable with 45, 50% owned Giolito, which I think he could potentially approach in some contests tonight. But if you're just looking at raw point per dollar projections, I do think Giolito is the best option on the board. And then Senzatella going for the Rockies. I mean, Coors Field or not, this guy is one of the worst starting pitchers in baseball. You've got just an exhausted Rockies bullpen, horrible Rockies bullpen behind him. And I mean, I think the Red Sox are just going to keep doing what they've done these last couple days. This is the first righty they faced against the Rockies, so I actually think, have a better lineup against right-handed pitchers than they do against lefties. Duran, Roman Anthony, Abreu. You've got Story, Narvaez in there. Yoshida, I think, making his 2025 debut in the lineup in the 6 hole. So, yeah, this Red Sox team looks really good, and I think we're going to see a lot of offense right out of the gate. Mets, Yankees, Boston all should have good nights at the plate. Where'd you end up with the Rockies and the Red Sox stats?
Yeah, I mean, it's always one of those things where we kind of target these Colorado games, whether in Colorado or not, and Boston has come through. I mean, the bats have come through for us, but I've got them rated. I mean, they're still rated really high, not as high as they were in some of these previous games. So they do have the highest team total on the board here. We've, like you said, we went through the first 3 games, and they're 3 of the higher team totals that we have, Boston being the highest. Yeah, I mean, I like Story, Abreu, Duran, Yoshida, as you mentioned. And then you've got Hamilton at 2,800. I also like here. So this is easily 5-man stacks. I think they'll be heavily owned. So I think maybe getting off of them, heading over to like those Mets and Yankee stacks may offer a little bit better value and maybe a little bit better leverage against the field. But it's tough to pass up on these Red Sox bats. When you look at Giolito, I've got him as the number 1 option. It's hard to get him off the number 1 option here at that price at 8,500 against Colorado. The question becomes, in my 150 builds, do I necessarily want to get over the mark? Do I want to be 40% Gio? I don't think I do, even though I've got him as my number 1 option. So I'll be okay if the entire market gets to that 35, 40%, which I think they will, and I'm sitting at 30. I'm okay with that, because I think when we get to a couple of these other guys, they might be a little under, the guys I have second and third here on the list, or at least the guy I have second might be a little under. So I'm thinking maybe we bump him up. We'll get to that when we get to that game. But Gio at the 8,500, I think, is clearly the best option in the betting market. In the props, 6.5 is his strikeouts. That's juiced to the under. 18.5 is his pitching outs. That's also juiced to the under, but one of the highest that we've got here on the entire slate. So I do like Boston bats, of course, on the Colorado side. Just not going to touch it. I know they're going to pop as decent leverage spots, leverage plays against the starting pitcher, because we're going to get such high ownership on Gio. Not one of those spots that I really want to look for the leverage here with Colorado bats. So passing on the Colorado bats, this is all Boston for me. Definitely 5-man stacks. They're in play, 5-man secondaries, and Gio, my number 1 pitching option.
Yeah, right on the same page here with Rockies and Red Sox. We did lose the Orioles game just now. Orioles and Mets off the table, postponed. A couple of people have mentioned that in chat as well. So there you go.
It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Enough to digest on this now 10-game slate. Now we don't need to deal with that weather at Camden Yards. So no Mets and Orioles. We're down to 10 games. Still plenty of options on this slate. Next up, we go to Great American Ballpark for the Marlins and the Reds. Andrew Abbott going for Cincinnati. He's had a ridiculously good season. Has Abbott, I think, kind of pitching a little bit over his head so far, but unquestionably has been very strong so far this season. It's a pretty good matchup here against the Marlins. I don't think they're as bad as people think, but they don't profile quite as well against the lefties, in my opinion. Some of their better hitters, Jesus Sanchez, Kyle Stowers, not even in the lineup tonight against Abbott. So I think Abbott here has a chance to pitch pretty well, get some strikeouts. I think he is somewhat interesting at 9,500. I still think he's not even need the salary discount, just shouldn't be projected as high as Giolito in my eyes, but still an okay option on this slate. And then Sandy Alcantara will go for Miami. I've definitely played Alcantara more than I should have, at least based on the results. Still sitting there with an ERA over 7 here as we go into the All-Star break. He's making his last start before the break, and it has not gone well for Alcantara. I'm going to flip the script here, I guess, and try to get on the other side because I kind of like this Reds team against Alcantara. He's been hit really hard all season. It's a great place to hit in general. Great home run park. And the final thing I'll mention about Alcantara, because the Reds do have some speed, I think he's on pace to break like the modern MLB record for stolen bases allowed. Base stealers are 23 for 23 off Alcantara in just 84 innings this season. I would expect, especially the top of this Reds lineup, Friedel, McLean, and Ellie De La Cruz, to be off to the races should they get a chance, which, given how hittable Alcantara has been, seems like they might in this one. So I'm in on the red stack. That's 4 straight. I guess the Mets are off the slate, but I guess 3 now. Yankees, Boston, Cincinnati. I think we're going to see runs early on the slate stats. And I'm in on this red stack. Marlins, maybe individual bats. I mean, particularly Agustin Ramirez has to be on the list every day at catcher. Not to the Cal-Raleigh level, but I've mentioned a few times, I think he's the second best power hitting catcher in the big leagues right now. 3,800 is still too cheap against the lefty. So I probably won't go too much farther with the Marlins. Where'd you end up with Miami and Cincinnati here?
Yeah, on the bats for the Marlins, yeah, it's Ramirez and Dane Myers as well at 3K. Yeah. I like here. I don't necessarily love all that much offensively, the bats. I don't really love the pitching either. But you mentioned Cincinnati with the stolen bases, and that's right on point. I think the home run projections, at least, we're expecting not a lot on the Cincinnati side, and that's really suppressing. They're suppressing them in the model for me, but we do have very high probabilities on a lot of these guys to steal a base. McLean, obviously Ellie. You've got Marte and Friedel. I mean, these guys are all 17 to 21, 22% probability of stealing a base in this game. So yes, for the stolen bases, I think with Cincinnati, I think you kind of have to play them. I don't like them necessarily in a 5-man stack, but I think if you're playing them, I would prefer playing them in a 5-man stack, because if it goes off, if it's going to be maybe a lot of runs with not a lot of home runs. And I kind of like in my secondary stacks guys who are going to hit home runs. Although, we'll take a couple of hits and a stolen base with a run scored, I guess, as well. That'll be fine for some of these prices. But I would I'm going to be pretty low both of these teams as far as offenses go. On the pitching side, yeah, you mentioned Abbott. I mean, at 9,500, I just can't get behind. Like, we just talked about Gio at 8,500. I mean, 1,000 less. Obviously, the projections aren't nearly as high here for Abbott, and he's 1,000 more, I should say. With Abbott, you look in the betting market, he's at 4.5 strikeouts at 9,500 price tag. It's just too paying too high for that little of a strikeout projection. 17.5 is his outs prop, with Alcantara 4.5 strikeouts as well. He's actually got a slightly better juice here on his 4.5 than we're getting on. It's really close with him and Abbott. It's basically the same number, same projections, with a very similar. Matter of fact, Alcantara's got a better pitching out total at -150 to the over. So, I mean, big price differential on these guys, and yet, we got to pay. They're going to be pretty similar as far as projections go. I don't particularly care for either one. I've got Abbott as my seventh best option. He'll find his way into my 150 builds, but I just think there's a clear 3 top pitchers here, and then kind of everyone else tonight. So not going to have much. I don't think the market's going to be much more than 10%. I don't think on Abbott. So if you want to get a little bit leverage, I know you mentioned Ramirez. I do like him as well. Maybe Myers. Other than that, with this game, I'm not getting too heavy in this game at all.
Yeah, a little surprised to hear that on the Reds, given how hard Alcantara's been hit. The park, I think, is maybe the best hitting park available tonight to pick from, and Marlins bullpen not that great either. So I'm definitely in on the Reds here against Sandy Alcantara. I'm sure he'll turn back the clock and turn into the Cy Young version now that I'm on the other side. But I do think this Reds team has quite a bit of potential to put up some big fantasy numbers. Looks like the market not really on, or the public, not really on Alcantara. I mean, the Reds against Alcantara, seeing sub 5% for pretty much this entire lineup, which is pretty intriguing to me. So I'll be in on some Reds tonight for sure. Let's get to target field for the Twins and the Cubs. No weather issues here. Should be kind of modest weather, 85 degrees, some humidity, but a little bit of winds blowing in. You've got Cade Horton going for the Cubs here. Kind of a nondescript righty, I would say, but he's been okay so far. I do think he's a little bit better of a strikeout pitcher than his numbers would indicate. And I do think he is the best cheap option on the board. Cade Horton. There's not many of them, so it's almost damning by faint praise with Horton. But if I had to choose a cheap pitcher, Horton is at the top of my personal list. And then David Festa going for the Twins here. Decent talent. Results have not been there for him, and I wouldn't really expect them to come tonight against this dangerous Cubs lineup, who I don't like them as much as the Yankees or the Red Sox or even the Reds, but obviously potential to break the slate, even if they didn't do too much yesterday. So I like the Cubs some as I assume, somewhat contrarian stack. Maybe a little bit of Horton for me if I find a lineup where I need to use a cheaper pitcher, but it's kind of one where you're just kind of hoping for 15 fantasy points. Probably not going to get a ton more than that, even if things go well for Horton. Stats, where'd you end up with the Twins and the Cubs here?
Yeah, I mean, let's just look at the pitchers quick. I've got Festa and Horton down near the bottom, 16th, 17th pitcher, respectively here on this slate. So not going to have much of either, if any. Got 4.5 is the strikeout prop for both of these guys. 15.5 outs for Horton, juice to the under. 14.5 for Festa, juice to the over. Just nothing is really popping for me with these guys, but I do love bats in this game, and I think the Chicago bats more than anything are really. I think they're just going to be under-owned. So yeah. I think the Chicago bats are very much in play, very intriguing. They're going to score really well when that boom report comes out after the show. They're going to be a high tournament edge team because of the ownership being down on these guys. So, PCA, Tucker, Happ, Suzuki, Bush, all those guys are going to rate really high, with Swanson not too far behind them. Minnesota bats rate pretty well also, just not even close, though, to what I'm getting for Chicago. So they're sort of they're a tier down. Buxton is up there with those guys. And then after like those 5-6 top Chicago bats, then you've got a slew of the Minnesota guys with Jeffers and Wallner, Bader, Larnach, and Correa. But definitely a tier down. And I think the ownership level is going to be kind of similar on both, but you'll get a little bit more here on some of these Cub bats with, like a Happ and Tucker, and those guys will be a little bit higher than Minnesota. But I think on the whole, we're getting pretty similar ownerships for both of these teams. And I think on the whole now, the Cub ownership now with the Met game off the board, both of these teams will probably see a little bit of that come their way. But I think overall, still far too low on the ownership, I think, for the Cubs for the potential that they have in this one.
Yeah, I'll mention too, Twins have some pretty good arms at the back end of their bullpen, but Griffin Jax has pitched 3 out of 4 days now. He's almost assuredly unavailable in this game. And the Twins also used 5 total relievers yesterday, and their closer is a little bit banged up. I'm not sure if he's Joan Duran, if he's going to be able to go, but potentially a tough spot for the Twins bullpen if the Cubs are able to do some damage early and get to Festa, which frankly seems like they've got a pretty good chance to do so. So I think I got to join in on the Cubs love with the stats, especially just at that ownership. I mean, they're another team. Looks like similar ownership to the Reds, kind of topping out at 6, 7, 8%, and then on down from there. Looks like a pretty good spot to get some leverage against the field with the Cubs stack. So I like that call. And yeah, with Cubs, you could play most of these guys and mostly stick to the top half of the lineup. You got to pay for it for sure, but you can get in some cheaper bats with that Cubs stack. So I'm in with your stats on the Cubs. They look pretty good to me as well. To Kansas City next. Very strong hitting weather in Kauffman Stadium tonight. Still won't play great for home runs, but good for everything else. You've got the most expensive pitcher on the board for the Royals here, Kris Bubic, who's been really good this year. Has come back to earth a little bit over the last 4 or 5 starts, but I think it's mostly been matchup based. He's had a pretty tough run of matchups against him. Not the case tonight against this Pirates lineup that looks somehow even worse than it normally does. Mostly righties in there, which is actually arguably a good thing for Kris Bubic, who has a higher strikeout rate against righties than he does against fellow lefties. So he's at the top of my list for me. I assume he's kind of right there for you as well, stats. And then Bailey Falter going for Pittsburgh, thrown from the left side. Not a high strikeout arm, not the worst pitcher, but not one I don't think that you want to use against this Royals team. I'd be more apt to use some of these Royals bats. India, Bobby Witt at the top of the lineup look pretty good. Really, 1 through 6 looks pretty good for me with the Royals. Rookie Jack Plaglione hit a bomb yesterday. He'll maybe start coming around soon. And yeah, I think this Royals team does have some potential here tonight against Falter and the Pirates. Stats, where'd you end up with Pirates and Royals here?
So yeah, Bubic. I've got, is Bubic or Bubic? Bubic.
I'm not sure, one or the other.
I keep hearing both, but
Yeah.
I like Bubic, so I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
But I've got as my second best pitcher here on the slate, and I think he's actually, because of the 10K price tag, I think we're going to get a lot more of that Gio ownership. Gio will be the number 1 pitcher owned here, and I think Bubic might be the third option behind Cease. Again, I think that's because of the price. And so if I'm right there, I actually want to bump him up a little bit. So now that Sabre took that Baltimore game off the board, we're getting some updates on their projected ownerships. But so right now if it's got Bubic down at like 24%, Cease and Gio up in the 30 plus percent, I want to move Bubic up there as well. So I want to get all these guys actually 30 plus percent. I'm going to be pretty narrow, a little bit more narrow on my pitching than I normally am. I just don't like a lot of these other options. So I'll be very happy if I could get over on that upside that I think we've got with Bubic. So you're looking at 6.5 strikeouts in the betting markets prop with 17.5 outs, heavy juice to the over there. Falter, I didn't really mention, but just 2.5 strikeouts is his prop total. Not a ton of interest for Falter for me. As a matter of fact, I've got him as the worst option on the entire slate. Just we're not going to get any Ks, so not even going to look at that, even at the cheaper price tag. As far as the offenses go, I think it's Kansas City or nothing. I'm not going to really touch these Pittsburgh bats. I don't want to use them as some sort of a leverage against Bubic. So I think it's just KC bats and really secondary stacks for me. Witt is always going to be a play. Sal Perez, Garcia, those are the 2 guys that I like as well. And maybe a little Caglianone, but that's about it. So I like secondary stacks for Kansas City. Nothing on the Pittsburgh side offensively or pitching wise. And then I want to get over the market on Bubic.
Completely agree. Bubic looking like a really, really strong option on the slate. And yeah, as we kind of talked through it, I do think the good pitching options, you kind of want to be over the field and just let everybody else play some of these junkers, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of great outings out of essentially the non-chalk pitchers. So absolutely in on Bubic, who the matchups maybe not quite as good, but I definitely think Bubic is a much better long-term pitcher than Giolito is, and you're going to get the lower ownership. You do have to pay for it a little bit, but I do think Bubic makes a lot of sense, especially if you're trying to get away from what I think is going to be an extremely popular Giolito in that Red Sox and Rockies game. We'll move on to the next game of the slate. It is in St. Louis for the Cardinals and the Nationals. Similar weather here to Kansas City. No surprise there. We've got Mackenzie Gore going for the Nationals. It's been a little shaky over the last 4 or 5 starts. I'm wondering a little bit, Stats, if he's wearing down just a little. He's thrown a lot of innings and a lot of pitches every time out. It's, 100, 105 pitches. He's a guy who's out there throwing hard, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him come out of the All-Star break looking a little bit more fresh. I think he could use, frankly, a little bit of time off from that left arm. So I'm a little hesitant on him just for those reasons. But he's a high strikeout arm. He always has been a talented guy. Matchup here against the Cardinals is decent. Most of their better bats, I think, swing from the left side. So without the face Gore, left versus left. I like Gore here at 9,800, but I do have him below both Bubic and Giolito. So, multiple lineups. I do think Gore is certainly in play. Andre Payante will go for St. Louis. Generally not a great fantasy pitcher. He's okay, real-life pitcher at preventing runs, but the strikeouts just generally aren't there for him. I think we can do better than the $7,200 for Andre Payante. Bats in this game, I'm personally not looking at a whole lot here. I think you could make a case for Abrams and Wood up top. Always kind of a fun 2-man stack that you can usually get very low owned. But beyond that, not a lot I like here for hitting. Stats, what are you doing with the Nationals and the Cardinals?
Yeah, I mean, Payante, I've got my 10th best pitcher on the slate. Just not enough strikeouts here for the innings. He's going to give you he'll give you the innings. I mean, that's a good thing. We just don't expect a lot of the strikeouts. He's 17.5 is juiced to the over on his outs. Just 3.5 Ks, though. With Gore, the same 17.5 outs, heavy juice over with a 5.5 strikeout. That is juiced to the under. So, I mean, for Payante, 10th best option. Maybe I'm going to sprinkle him in. I mean, I know Saber has updated it to where they've actually got him slightly higher owned than Gore's going to be, which I don't know if that's going to be the case. Maybe it's just that big price differential between the two. Then people are there's not many options here under that 8,500. There's not too many really strong choices. So perhaps that's where some of the ownership will come from. People just kind of sticking them in a matchup that they figure against Washington's decent, but I won't have all that much. Gore, I've got as my 6th best pitcher. I think it's the 9,800 price tag and the fact that he does throw a lot of pitches. A lot of that has to do with control. He's a strikeout and decently high walk guy. So we're getting a lot of he's throwing a lot of missing bats, whether they're swings or just out of the strike zone. So that's going to jack up his pitch total and the innings that we're expecting. So at the 9,800, he's in play for me in my 150 builds as my 6th option. I mean, if the Saber number is right, I think you do want to get over on that. I mean, they're having basically about 8%. I think getting, in that closer to 15%, I have no problem with, but I don't have them particularly high. I just think with that talent at just 7% with the pitching slate that I don't think is all that great, you're not going to be shocked if he throws a 30-pointer out there at you. And I wouldn't want to miss that certainly in my 150 build. So even in a 20 build up, I'll probably have, 1, maybe 2, but certainly in the 150, I think getting yourself somewhere in the low teens, somewhere around there should suffice and get you at least slightly over the market. So that's kind of my take on both of those pitchers. Offensively, I don't like much. I mean, a matter of fact, I'm going to totally X out pitchers. I'm hitters. I'm not going to take any bats in this game whatsoever.
I really don't see a lot that I like either, so I'll join you on the hitting fade, at least for the most part in this one. And yeah, Gore, I express my concerns about him, but at 7%, that's then kind of baked in there. So I agree with you. I think if you're playing a lot of lineups, you definitely want to get over 7%. And even if you're playing one lineup, if you get Mackenzie Gore, if that number really does prove true, 7 or 8% for Mackenzie Gore, that's a pretty good play right there, I think. And you just go ahead and live with the results for one of the, like you said, I think there's only a few pitchers on the slate who even have the possibility to give you 25, 30-plus fantasy points, and Mackenzie Gore is absolutely one of them. Won't be owned like he is. So I'm in at that number for sure, even if I do have little bit of concern about Gore at the moment. Cleveland and Houston up next in Minute Maid Park. You've got Brandon Walter going for the Astros. Has been surprisingly effective so far. Good matchup for him for sure against this Guardians team that does not hit lefties well. Did get to Hunter Brown yesterday. That was surprising to see. It happens to every pitcher once in a while. I would expect Walter to pitch pretty well here, but that $8,700 price tag is kind of steep, I think, for the type of pitcher that Walter is. And then the Guardians will go with Slade Ciccone, who I've played him more than most, and for the most part, he's been pretty solid at low price points. But problem is the price has come up now. He's 8,300. He's no longer a value arm, and he gets what should be a pretty low strikeout matchup, even against the right-handed heavy Astros. So I kind of crossed off both of these pitchers, but I'm not crazy about the offenses either. This is one of the games we're probably not going to have overall too much exposure. It does seem obviously like we're both pretty heavy on those early offenses, which are going to leave some of these last few games as ones that we're going to be, I think, mostly avoiding. Stats, where'd you end up with Cleveland and Houston here?
Yeah, I mean, let's just go over the pitchers here. With Ciccone, I've got him as the 9th option on this slate. The 8,300 for the strikeouts aren't great. I think he's kind of like mid. I mean, I've got him in 9th, and he's kind of mid all the way through with the projections that we have. So I think he finds his way into 150 builds, somewhere lower than what Saber is showing him at. For me, they got him at 12%. I'll probably be, somewhere in the single digits, 5, 6, 7%, somewhere in that range on him. And then as far as Walter, I do have Walter rated a bit better. I've got him as the 5th best option, and now with Peterson not in there, you could bump him up to 4th. 8,700. Yeah, the strikeout numbers aren't as high as you would like, but pretty elite as far as control. Not going to walk anybody. Projected as some of the one of the lower earned runs projections here against this Cleveland team. So I think you've got, even the outs were projected. I mean, the innings pitched or outs we're projecting pretty high here for Walter, highest on the entire slate. So we're with the lack of walks, and unfortunately the lack of strikeouts does let these guys get the ball in play, may get him a little deeper into this game. I think the upside is limited because of the strikeouts, but not a terrible option here at the 8,700. He'll find his way into my 150 builds. I think that 14%, 15% that we're seeing on Saber is about right. I'll probably be in that zone as well for Walter. But offensively, really, it's going to be a pass for me on this game entirely. So I think this one is just pitching. Again, back-to-back games here. We kind of like those early games. I don't like much as far as the bats go. I think I'm going to kind of pass on bats in this game.
Yeah, despite the somewhat mediocre pitching, I do think this is one of the worst games for bats. And yeah, Walter makes some sense, especially on this type of slate, right, where we're not anticipating a lot of huge pitching scores. The 15 to 20 that Walter's got a pretty good shot to give you could absolutely play on this particular slate. So I kind of like that call on Walter. Definitely prefer him at relatively the same ownership as Ciccone. Give me Walter all day over Ciccone at pretty much the same price and ownership. Westward we go to Angels Stadium in Anaheim. We've got the ageless Kyle Hendricks still going out there and sometimes given okay performances. 6,300 for him, as always. I don't think really on the table. And then Kumar Rocker has looked a little bit better recently, but I still don't really trust Rocker very much. And he's pretty low on my list as well at 7,500, even in a high strikeout matchup against the Angels. I do think the offenses are interesting here. Should be a good night to hit in Angels Stadium, a little bit warmer than it typically is, and the ball should be flying. And yeah, I think these offenses are interesting. Obviously, Hendricks has his flaws, and then he can't throw harder than, like 85 miles per hour. And then Rocker, I just think he's going to be one of the more blow-up prone pitchers there is, given his style of pitching. So Angels have power, and Rocker, is going to fall behind in counts, come in with the fastball, and I think the Angels could potentially do some real damage in this one. So I assume these offenses will go a little bit lower owned, but I do think they're both interesting. Not as good as those East Coast games that we talked about at the start of the show, but still on my list as options. Stats will tell you Rangers and Angels.
So I've got Rocker down like 13th choice.
Yeah.
Definitely good, pretty decent strikeout numbers. Do I have the betting? Yeah, I've got the betting market here, 5.5 on his strikeouts, just 15.5 outs juiced to the under for Rocker. So we're not expecting him to go deep. Hendricks there looking to go a little bit deeper, 16.5 pitching outs, 3.5 on his K-prop total. I actually like Hendricks a little bit more than I do Rocker in this one. Not going to be heavy on either one of these pitchers. I've got Hendricks as my 8th best option. He's obviously I just went over the props here with the for the K props. Nothing to get all too crazy over, but at just 6,300, I think the lack of walks is a benefit. I think you're capped on the upside. He's not going to give you a 30-point performance, but if we could get in the high teens here, I think from Hendricks, you'd be okay with that at the 6,300. And I think the potential is there for that. The projections aren't going to show it. He's going to be one of the lower projected pitchers out there. But I think if you get in the high single digits on there with your 150 builds, you're going to be okay. As far as the offenses go, I think the Angels, and oftentimes the Angels are in this situation where they're a pretty good leverage play against starting pitching because they do hit home runs. And a lot of times the starting pitchers are going to really project well against them, and it limits the ownership that you get on the Angels. It's not the strongest play that I've seen here with the Angels being a leverage spot. I've seen them in better spots, but on this slate, if you're looking for leverage spots, there really weren't many. And I think the Angels are one of them. So you can definitely play Angel bats. I prefer them here, secondary stacks tonight. But I don't mind Angel bats at all on this slate. And then the Texas bats I like a little bit more. Look at the ownership, what we've got on these guys, because I would have them similar. I think the Texas bats are going to be much higher owned. I think for the ownership on Texas, at least what we're showing here on Saber and like the low teens on these bats, I think is a little too high. So I'd prefer. I'm going to be under on the Texas bats. Probably get myself over on some of these Angel bats, and that's what I like as far as this one. I just think you get better leverage the Angels and slightly more home run potential on some of these Angel bats. I mean, it's really close, but I think for the ownership that we're going to see on both of these teams, I'd prefer to be on the Angel side than the Rangers.
I'm with you there. It does seem to me like they should have similar ownership, and at least if Saber's right, Texas looks like they'll have roughly double the ownership that the Angels have. So given that, I'm with you. Give me some Angels bats as low owned upside plays against a super volatile pitcher in Kumar Rocker. Next up, we go to Petco Park. Is it still called Petco Park?
I believe it is.
It is. Yeah, it's still called Petco Park. Dylan Cease, Brandon Pfaadt, 2 righties going in this one. Been kind of a rough ride for Dylan Cease this year. The strikeout stuff is still there for him, but he's had plenty of trouble preventing runs. He has been, no surprise, I'm sure, but much, much better at home than he has been on the road. So I guess bump for him pitching in Petco tonight. We'll take on a pretty tough Diamondbacks lineup. No Josh Naylor, so a little bit watered down, but still, in general, not a ton of strikeouts against the D-backs. Seeing Dylan Cease, according to Saber, come in with some decently high ownership here. They've got him currently projected at 30% owned, which to me feels quite a bit too high, frankly. So I don't love Cease. I'm sure his strikeout prop is decent still. And then Brandon Pfaadt, I don't play much Brandon Pfaadt. Just can't get out lefties to save his life. This is a fairly dangerous Padres team, even in this park. I'm not going to end up with much from this game stats, but maybe you've got some interest in Dylan Cease. Go ahead, talk to us. Arizona and San Diego.
Yeah, definitely interested in Cease. Like I said, that was my third option, or my third best option here on the slate. I mentioned the three that I like the most, and then the other guys are, no one else is really getting me too excited. So Cease was my third of the Gio Bubic crew here, and like I said, I think I want to be in the 30s plus on all three of these guys, and I'll kind of take my chances from there. I think the K, I mean, you probably got the most K upside from Cease. He will walk batters, going to be, one of the wilder pitchers on this slate. That is a knock. The 9,300, the 700 savings off of Bubic, I think is helpful. And I think that's where you're going to see people getting off. That's why I want to get over the market on Bubic here, because I think people are just going to downgrade him with Cease and Gio with that savings. But that's why I want to bump him up. But I don't want to really get under the market on either Cease or Giolito. I'm just worried about Cease being he is capable on any night of just giving you that big outing, and so I don't want to really fade it too hard. I want to be at least at the market, if not over here, which I think anything over 30% should suffice and get me where I need to be. 6.5 is his total strikeout total in the betting market. 17.5 pitching outs, and those are both juiced to the over with Fott at 4.5 and 17.5. So yeah, I mean, that as far as the pitching, that's what I like there. Don't love the bats in this game much at all. If you want to take a shot, I think the leverage play would be to go against Cease, and I would like it. I don't know if I like a full game stack. Carroll, Marte would be about all I would go. Maybe even if you took him, taking a Corbin Carroll as a one-off is never a terrible option if you could fit that kind of salary in there. If you're playing, you got some cheaper stacks, maybe some cheaper pitching, and you throw Corbin Carroll. I prefer him over the Marte, but I would take either one of those guys if you have the room, if you're looking for a strong leverage play. I just don't like maybe a 5-man stack, even the secondary, even like a 2-man secondary stack here with Arizona. But yeah, other than that, really not touching bats in this game. I'm not touching the San Diego bats at all.
Yeah. San Diego, yeah, I think Merrill and Sheets, if he's in there, okay. I do love lefties in general against Fott. You could look there. And, yeah, if you do like the Diamondbacks tonight, you're going to get them at looks like about 1% out across the board, which I think is a little bit interesting against Cease, who, like you said, does walk people. He does give up his fair share of power and hasn't overall been that effective at preventing runs. So slight disagreement, I guess, with us on Cease. I personally think, I mean, if Mackenzie Gore is really going to come in, 3 or 4 times less owned than Cease, I view them pretty similar on this slate. So I'll take the ownership discount personally between the two, or between Cease and Gore, who I do think are similar types of pitchers overall. Last game on the slate, Atlanta Braves and the just the A's, I guess. Just the A's in Sacramento. Awesome park to hit here, obviously. Going to be similar weather to what we've seen. We saw this A's team go pretty crazy last night. Got the opportunity to do so again here against Bryce Elder, who is not any good. This Braves team kind of down to their bare bones pitching staff with all the injuries they've had outside of Spencer Strider. Nick Kurtz has been just crazy good as a rookie. Would expect him to continue that run perhaps tonight against Elder in this Braves bullpen. So I'm in on the A's for sure here. We've been mostly out on these last few offenses, but I think the A's are back in play, as are the Braves against Mitch Spence, who is not a pitcher to fear. Bad bullpen behind him from the A's. And it's all offense for me here, Stats. How high did you end up on the Braves and the A's here? I assume you are pretty decently high on both these offenses.
Yeah, it's tough not to like both offenses in this ballpark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is I wouldn't even look at the pitchers here.
No.
There's just no way you're going to play either one of these pitchers. I think it's almost everyone in the lineup. So we've got that Athletic lineup out. Yeah, we don't have the Atlanta lineup as of yet, but we could kind of figure out who's going to be in there with Olsen and Riley, Azuna, Albies, Acuna, assuming he's in there. All those guys are going to be really highly rated, and the A's are just nearly as high here with Rooker and Butler, Langoliers, Kurtz. They're expensive. I mean, both sides of this game are a little expensive. You got Muncy in at third base at $3K, which I like. He rates decently high for me. I just think this one is it's very stackable, and it's one of those, if you're hand building, I mentioned it the other day with a few of these games, but if you're hand building, I kind of like, if you're going to play both of these stacks in 20, you're building 20 lineups, let's say, put them together at least once, because if you do get that really good hitting environment on two teams that are projected to have a pretty high team total, and we're projecting a lot of these bats at right around 20% plus for home run potential. If it just turns into one of those kind of games, I would want to have I'd want to have these teams stacked together just in case it turns into that. I think it's probably the best game stack if there is one tonight.
Like that call on the game stack, and always a pretty good idea in Sutter Health Field in Sacramento. Can get the home runs going. Could certainly happen tonight. That is all 10 games on the slate. We did lose the Mets and Orioles game, but everything else scheduled to go. Stats. Let's go back over some of our favorite stuff on this slate. We'll start with pitching. Your favorite pitching combination on DraftKings tonight?
Yeah, I mean it's going to be fairly chalky here. I'm going to go with Giolito and Bubic as my top combo, and I think Bubic's the one where I'll have the most leverage. I'll be probably over the market more on him than anyone else.
I've got the same answer. So there it is, Bubic and Giolito for me. We're gonna eat some chalk on Lucas Giolito. I'm sure that'll end up going well. But I do think
Gore might be important for you.
Yeah, I'll get some Gore in there. I'll be over the field there for sure, and we'll throw in some Schlittler as well, maybe on a team and roll the dice on that one. Top 3 stacks you're looking at tonight, stats.
Well, I'm going to go with more. Let's look at the game theory behind. I think the Cub stack is just going to be really lower owned than it necessarily should be. So I want to get over the market on these Cub stacks. I think what was the other game that we liked here? I mean, obviously I like the Yankees. The Yankees, I think, are just a pure, Yankees and Red Sox. Well, Red Sox for sure, the best projected on this entire slate, and I would say, who's my other one here that I like? Yeah, I'll keep it at that. Let's go Boston, Yankees, and Chicago. I mean, I love that Atlanta. I love the last game that we did too, but I'll save one of those for you. So I'll go Chicago is a really good option as far as low owned. I think much lower owned than they should be, and then Boston and the Yankees.
We'll come back with a new hat after the All-Star break, Christian. You're right. This Orioles hat needs to be retired. It's
man.
Just multiple months of wearing this garbage team's hat. No, can't do it anymore. So I'll make that promise, Christian. We'll have a better hat post All-Star break. In terms of my stacks, the Yankees and the Red Sox, I mean, I think kind of hard to avoid. If we're looking to go a little bit off the table, I like the Cubs too, but mine is the Reds. That's my contrarian stack of the night. Massive steal potential, great park to hit in, and I mean Alcantara. We don't like to reference ERA too much on these stats-driven shows, but still don't mind going up against a pitcher who's rocking a 7 ERA, 86 innings into his 2025 season. Home run call stats. Give us a singular home run call, and then we'll get on out of here into the Discord and finalize our lineups and all that good stuff.
I'll go to a game that the game I like. I didn't take. I'll take Brent Rooker home run tonight.
Yeah, I will go. I got to go with my man, Agustin Ramirez, back in Great American against Andrew Abbott. Just absolutely crushing it right now. Swinging for the fences every time up, which you love to see from your home run calls. That'll do it for this show. I'll be back at the normal time, I believe, with JT tomorrow as we wind down toward the All-Star break here. Appreciate everybody watching. Appreciate the support. Members get in the Discord. We'll be finalizing lineups over at Run Pure Sports. And yeah, until tomorrow, he's Stats. I'm DC. We're out of here.